Hey there, Rebels. It's Friday. Welcome to another episode of Fire Your Boss Fridays. With Chad and Lisa, of course, we are here to shake things up and challenge the norms because we're all trying to escape something. So before we dive in, a quick shout out to all of you out there. Remember, every episode is a step closer to stealing your life back, firing your boss, and living a life full of purpose. So drop us a comment if you want, send us your stories, and let's create a community that truly embodies the rebel spirit as we all escape the trap of the 9-to-5 and go into the authentic world that we all deserve. So today, we have someone here who's certainly walked many diverse paths. As far as I can tell, he's faced life's toughest challenges, and he's sitting right here with us in his home studio and emerged with stories that inspire and motivate. From basketball to the challenging world of SWAT negotiations, which kind of piques some interest for sure. And that also mentions a brave battle against cancer, which is always one of the big ones on the list. He's here to share his journey. And of course, he's leading an uncommon and extraordinary life. So Rebels, give a warm welcome to the founder of the Motivational Check. He's an author and motivational speaker, Terry Tucker. So Terry, are you ready to ignite some fires, challenge some perspectives? And dude, we got a huge story to unpack based on that intro. So can you tell our audience how you ended up on a podcast like Fire Your Boss Fridays?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting title. I mean, you guys seem to break the mold here with that. So I thought, boy, I would like to reach out to Chad and Lisa and see if maybe we could collaborate and, as you said, make people's lives a little bit more uncommon and extraordinary. So I'm really looking forward to being here with both of you.
Cool, man. Yeah, absolutely. And after seeing some of your work, I was like, okay, this is a good fit, man. So let's have some fun. Now, you're a motivational speaker, author. Obviously, you've done a lot of things. You have a book. I know we have a lot to unpack, but Terry, I want to talk about this book, Sustainable Excellence. Okay, so that's big just in those two words. But in the way that you describe it, 10 principles to leading an uncommon and extraordinary life. Do you mind if we start with the conversation right out of that book? Because I have a feeling, if I'm not wrong, all of that stuff that we need to unpack somehow plays a role in that book.
I would agree with you. No, I would love that. That would be great.
Cool. Well, let's fire on that. Start with the name, man. Is this a book we can judge by the cover, or tell me about it?
I happen to have a copy right here.
Nice. Okay, so we got hold on, bring it back up here. So we got the little steps here, right?
Yeah, the little.
So they are yeah, so these stones in my mind, when I first see them, speaking of judging a book by the cover, Terry, is the believing and knowing. So if I believe there's another step, I might take it. But if I know there's another step, I will take it. Am I on track with that at all?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When I first wrote the book, when I reached out and the publisher said, yes, I want to do this. So I had access to somebody who was doing a cover design. And it's like, what colors do you like and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I need something. And
surprise me.
And I was like, no, I'm going to show it to my family and friends. And like, no, that's not it. And then they came back with the stones, and the stones lead up. They keep getting bigger. They keep getting harder. They keep getting more difficult. But so do you if you take that next step, if you keep moving forward in life. And
right.
I think that's the metaphor, and that's why the stones work with the book.
Love it. Love it. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Now let's talk about the name. Now that we got the kind of the cover out of the way, Sustainable Excellence. That certainly is a challenge no matter what you're doing. I mean, I've been a vocalist, so having a consistent performance just with that, even within one song, to keep on a path of excellence. I mean, and then to carry that on a lifetime. Tell me a little bit more about that. Open up to us about that concept.
Yeah, I always get the question about the title. So, okay, write this book, Sustainable Excellence. What is excellence? And my response is, I don't know. They're like, what do you mean you don't know? You wrote the book, dummy. Come on, you got to know what excellence is. And the way I look at it is, excellence is kind of like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. I can't define excellence for you. You can't define excellence for me. We may look at a musical group, we may look at a sports team, a movie, a doctor, or whatever, and say, you may say, Chad, oh, they're excellent. I may look at them and say, I think they're good, but I don't know if they're excellent. So I think excellence is something, like I said, like beauty, that you have to define for yourself. So once you define that, then how do you sustain it? How do you, once you get to the top of the mountain, what do most people do? Kind of kick back, put themselves, feet up on the table, pour themselves a drink. I've arrived. And then what happens? 6 months later, a year later, boom, somebody passes you up. I'm like, whoa, why did that happen? That happened because you didn't sustain it. You didn't find another market. You didn't find a different way to deliver your service or a different service to deliver. You constantly have to innovate and get better because people study you. If you get to that top of the mountain, people look and see how did they do
why wouldn't they? Right? I mean, that guy did it.
Right.
They got their eye on you. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
They look at that, and then people aren't stupid. They're like, okay, I can do this better, or there's another market I can tap into that he's not tapping into, and that's how they pass you up. You constantly have to innovate. You constantly have to find a different way to do things.
Well, as long as you want to play fair, Terry, right? Because
say that again. I'm sorry, I missed it.
As long as you want to play fair, because I'm imagining someone sticking their foot out when someone tries to pass them by. It's like you depends on if you're trying to play fair. Anyway, I'm just having fun with you, brother.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I agree. I mean, but again, being authentic, being ethical, having integrity.
Yep.
I mean, that's been drilled into me since I was a little kid, since I went to college and a military school, since I was a police officer. Integrity is one of the most important things that you have. And I think if you compromise that, then we're kind of getting on a slippery slope.
Yeah, we are. And I think
I couldn't agree with you more on that one.
I knew you were going to come in on that, Lise. That's the foundation. Yep. I mean, that's the strength. That's what really holds everything together, right? And in what we're doing here. So certainly is something to note. And that's good. So to all of our listeners out there, I don't care what you're doing. Don't stick your foot out. Don't trip anyone on the way up, even if they are passing you, because in racing, I love Supercross. And in racing, a lot of times there's actually a strategy where guy number one and guy number two, if the guy in the lead, he knows the guy behind him is hot on his tail and is going to take him, sometimes he'll allow it so he can find out the moves that he's using to get to where he's going to pass him. Then he uses those same things to pass him back. And so it is actually a strategy, and it's a healthy, normal, competitive strategy to use. And so I think that's kind of what we're going into. But of course, you're not taking anyone out on the way. So I don't mean to interrupt you, but there's some fire stuff already. So I just want these listeners to start to, take notes. There's 3 big things right there, right? Like the integrity, right? And then also your competition is certainly something that you want to play with. You don't want to fear it at all. It's actually, it's sort of a team effort in a sense, right? We're all climbing the same mountain, essentially.
Right. You're climbing the same mountain. You're looking to do the same thing. And obviously you're trying to niche wherever that is for you, where you see your niche, but you learn from other people. I mean, society's been around for a long time. I mean, why aren't we making the same mistakes? Hundreds and thousands of people made the same goofy mistakes that we've made. Why aren't we learning from those mistakes so that we don't make those same mistakes? So absolutely learn from other people. That's one of the chapters in my book is the importance of being curious, remaining curious, and being a lifelong learner. And whether that's learning from your competition or learning from yourself or somebody else, a whole nother career field. I'm going to go. I had a good friend of mine who wrote one of the cover quotes, was the former president and CEO of the Henry Ford Health Systems in Detroit. And she hired her replacement from the hospitality industry, from hotels and restaurants, not from the healthcare world, because she felt that he had a better feel on how we deliver patient satisfaction, how we deliver quality patient care, and not so much, hey, we're basically doing what the insurance companies tell us to do. No, we wanted to deliver great patient care. And so she
Love
hired
it.
him from an industry that wants to deliver good quality care. Otherwise, you don't come back.
Well played. Well played, right? But that's thinking outside of the box, by the way, right? Because she could have stayed with the typical norms. So there's a
Right.
perfect example of what we're trying to crush every day. She crushed it. She went and she stepped outside of the norms and she brought in this from this level. So I think that's amazing. Thanks for bringing that up, Terry. What a cool story. So, all right, man. So let's jump back over to the depth of the book. So you have a big career, right? You have all sorts of really interesting things to add. And how did you mold that together? And I guess when I say that is like, when was the tipping point where you go, okay, this should be in a book?
Yeah, I didn't want to write a book.
You didn't? It wasn't your thing? Okay, well, let's share it. Let's tell me about that.
There's sort of that old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God has never talked to me and said, Terry, write a book or anything like that. But I think what God does is put people in our path that start making the same suggestion over and over and over again. And people kept saying, Terry, you should write a book. Terry, you should write a book. I'm like, I'm not writing a book. But it got to a point.
The way you just said that, dude. I can feel it. Oh, man. Oh, shoot. Yeah.
I mean, I was battling cancer. I'm like, write a book. Are you kidding? I can't write a book. I shouldn't write a book. Who am I to write a book? Sort of. And I hate the words
a lot of people say all that stuff too. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I remember reading an article that said 83% of Americans feel they have a book inside them, whether it's a memoir or a fiction book, and less than 1% of those people will ever write that book.
Yeah,
which is such a shame.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
I mean, I don't care what your life is about. You have a story to tell that other people can learn from.
Yeah, amen. I think that's all this whole coaching explosion that's happened in general, not just with books, but it's given them other platforms, and the amount of education, unique individual education that's being spread across the internet right now is fascinating, good and bad. Right. But that you want a unique perspective that aligns with you, you're probably going to find it, which 20 years ago you couldn't. You'd fall into these, whatever they're publishing is all you're going to get, Right. So now you can get some kids' perspective on the bigger world and tap into that, and it's amazing. So let's come on back. So you didn't want to write the book, and everyone's nudging you, and I love your analogy of God sends people, because that's what they call service, right? You're the venue, right? Everybody's just the venue of this, right? So you finally cave in. Okay, I'll do it. So
what was the tipping point?
So the book really ended up being born out of two conversations I had. I used to be a girls' high school basketball coach when we lived in Texas. And I had one of my players move to Colorado, where my wife and I live, with her fiance. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. She got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you're put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then a young man reached out to me on social media from college, and he said, what are the most important things I should learn, not to just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And Chad, Lisa, I didn't want to give him that, get up early, work hard, help other. I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches that we all know. So I wanted to see if I could go deeper. So I spent some time taking notes and things, and sort of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally, I had my leg amputated because of cancer in 2020. During that 3 to 4 month period where I was healing, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories. And there were real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Wow. Like a gift almost.
It was.
Like it just landed right in your lap, basically, man, because all the circumstances just boom, boom, boom. That's
Everything
awesome.
lined up.
Is that how you see it too, or am I missing something?
No, that's exactly how I see it. And you write a book, and I wrote. People ask, well, how did you write the book? I'm like, I had two rules. Number one, I'll write a minimum of one page every day, Monday through Saturday. I'll take Sunday off. And number two, I won't edit anything until I feel I have the first draft done. And there were days, I'd sit down at the computer and I would write absolute garbage. And then the next day I might write something better. And then the next day maybe something better. And then another day garbage. And so it was just, you knew at the end you could sift through all this and say, okay, that's not going to be in there, and that's not going to be in there. But then I had this manuscript and I'm like, is it any good? Is anybody going to want to read it? Should I even bother trying to publish it? And so I gave it to two friends of ours. He's a former Navy SEAL. She's a former prosecutor, a lawyer. Okay. And I said, be honest, be brutally honest.
Sure.
And I gave a vote to them, and they both came back and said, no, you need to publish this as soon as possible. I'm like, okay. So.
Oh, I got a little choked up there, brother, because that's a big moment in your life, don't you think?
Oh, it was. I mean, the day that I got the copy, I have an unboxing video. I didn't even know that was a thing. That you put a video when the first copy of your book comes to your house and you get to see it for the first time. And yeah, I was a little choked up. I'm like, I've never had a baby, but it's probably the closest I've come to actually giving birth to something that was so close to me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I haven't read it, by the way, in case the audience is wondering. So that's why I'm technically asking for a friend right now. And so I'm trying to get as much insight as I can so that I got the full scoop on this thing. But so far, that sounds fascinating. So the way it's developed, and not all books come this way. So this a really neat story and how it comes about. Is there anything else like within the book that you think that you taught yourself by writing the book, right? So this happens to me all the time. I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to do this task, and I end up getting more out of it than what I thought I was going to be putting all me into the thing, but then it ends up giving me something. Did that happen for you in your book, Terry?
It did. So I developed these 10 principles, and then I start sort of self-reflecting on why do I put this one in and not another one? What's important about this? And it's always fun for me as an author when somebody reads the book and reaches out, because each chapter is a principle, and they're not in a particular order. Number one isn't any more important than number 7 or anything like that. But there's always one of the principles, one of the chapters that resonates with the reader particularly. And that's a great starting point. And one of them resonates with me too. And I'm going to give it to you. It resonates with me because I've probably done it more times in my life than I would care to admit. And here's the principle. Most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that. in my life. Oh, I should do this. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I don't have enough information, or what will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. And I always tell, especially when I speak to groups of young people, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Amen. I think too, I just heard this morning, man. You just validated something huge, Terry, with that. Somebody was saying in another interview I was watching where he says you're basing your decisions on the consequences, not the thing that it is. So the thing doesn't look hard. Dealing with the consequences of failure, which is similar to what you're saying, right? So you're basing it on an imaginary consequence for one, right? You get to make up the rules when you're still in an imaginary phase of your life or your world. It's still fake, by the way, guys. Just remember that, like, when you make up anything in your mind, and the way I put this analogy into perspective, Terry, and see if you like this one, brother, is I share with people, okay, so if you're in such control of your future, brother, remember the night you had the best night of your life, and they think of it, yeah, okay, I had the best night of my life, right? Yeah, that was a really amazing time, my friends or my brothers or whatever, right? And then I go, okay, well then why don't you just do it again?
Yeah.
That's how in control you are with your mind. You can't, I mean, I know there's this manifest world and, vision boards and like that's all healthy, but not in the way of like, you can't predict the whole thing. It is never like clockwork. And that analogy really plays out in the way I present that. And then you get people to let go of that thing you're talking about in your principle, right? That's what you're trying to teach, right? And do you go over ways to help them remove it, or do you just go over the idea and the principle? Share with us in your literature.
Yeah, I think we are conditioned to we learn through stories. So I just don't throw a principle out there. It's like, here's some stories. Here are things that will illustrate. And I'll give you one, just what we were talking about in the mind. So where I went to college, it's a small military college in South Carolina called the Citadel. And one year we had a president by the name of James Stockdale. You're both way too young to remember this guy. He was an 8-year prisoner of war during the Vietnam War. He was a naval aviator, shot down over Vietnam, spent 8 years being abused and tortured and all that, and eventually gets released. And he won the Medal of Honor for his actions during this time. And I was at an event with him. He was the president of the college. I was a cadet. So, I mean, I didn't have a lot of interaction with him. But somebody asked him, who were the people that survived that brutality, that torture, that abuse? And he said, well, let me tell you who didn't survive. He said, the big, tall, strong, tough guys who thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture, he said they didn't survive. And this one surprised me. He said, the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said, these were the people that thought they would be rescued or let go by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter, and Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter would come and go, and they wouldn't be rescued. He said those people died of a broken heart. He said the people that survived were the people that understood what they could control and controlled it, which according to him was basically the breathing in our lungs and the thoughts in our mind. Everything else was at the discretion of the enemy. And I think that's where we get in trouble. And it kind of goes to what you were saying, Chad, about people try to control stuff that's outside of their purview, that's outside of their control.
Way outside.
And that brings anxiety. That brings all kinds of physical problems. And now all of a sudden, you're having a lousy life because you can't control your mind. And you're trying to control things that are way outside your control. So I always try to tell people, understand what you can control.
I love that. That is and you do love stories, Terry, because that was an awesome one, brother. That's heavy.
It is.
That is a really heavy story. Yeah.
Actually, Stockdale went on, and again, you're too young to remember this. Back in the late 1980s, he was the vice presidential running mate for a man by the name of Ross Perot, who ran for president of the United States.
Yes. Okay. Wow. I didn't know he was a runner-up. That's crazy.
Yeah, he was his vice president.
That is cool, man. Wow. Yeah, you got a lot tucked away in there, Terry. So do you share a lot of this same type of stuff at your speaking events?
I do.
Do we talk? Yeah. Do we talk about the book? What kind of things do you really like to speak about at the events and things? What's your favorite for us? What fires you up?
There are two things that really fire me up. One is my 11-year battle with cancer. And I know that seems like, really, that fires you up? It really does. And two is the time that I spent as a hostage negotiator on the Cincinnati Police Department SWAT team. What I learned there and what I'm able to talk with people about how they can incorporate a lot of the stuff that we used, to get people out of really horrible situations where, I mean, if you're negotiating a deal in business, I mean, let's face it, nobody's probably got a gun to your head or anything like that. So it's a little bit easier, but the same kind of principles work as well.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So with cancer, so is this ongoing for you, Terry, or have you put this? Is this?
No,
on the
I
shelf?
still have tumors in my lungs that I'm treated for every 3 weeks.
Okay. So you're still just duking it out here. All right. Well, you look fantastic, dude, and your energy's like through the roof. So I don't know if that means anything to you.
Good drugs,
yeah. Well, whatever it is, it's you're presenting yourself well to the world today, but my friend. So with that said, on the rough days, or what is it that you find fascinating about it? Is that that you're basically this same prisoner of war, right? Where you're like, there's certain things that you feel are outside of your control, maybe. I don't know. I'm kind of throwing stuff out there. Give us an idea from your perspective.
So I'll answer that, but I'm going to tell you a story first. So
That's Terry's style. Get ready, people.
here we go. We got to
Here
start.
it comes.
So most of I would guess both of you remember Fred McFeely Rogers, Mr. Rogers on his television show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, educated so many kids, including me, on public television. 2003, Fred Rogers dies, and his family's going through his effects, and they find his wallet. And inside his wallet is a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written 4 simple words: life is for service. And I always remember that. I always remember that story. I love telling that story because for me right now, I am on a clinical trial drug that most likely is not going to save my life. But the way I look at it is maybe it's going to save the life of somebody 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, based on the data that the doctors are gleaning from my blood tests, my scans, and things like that. And one of the things I learned playing basketball, and I started playing basketball when I was 9 years old and played all the way up till I graduated from college when I was 21, was the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team, and whatever team that, we're all on teams, whatever team that is, you realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. And so I go to be treated, understanding that it's probably not going to save me, but it's more about somewhere down the line, 5 years from now, that I don't even know who this person will be, but their life gets saved. They get to spend more time with their family based on what I'm going through right now. And that's why I do what I do. This is much bigger than me. This is about service, just like it was for Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very honorable, my friend. Thank you, Terry, for putting yourself out there like that, man. That is really cool. So the man of men here, Terry, putting himself on the line. I think it's an amazing place to be for you too. And that honor, you can walk, into any room and know your integrity and honor and all that. I mean, you're unstoppable, brother. So with that energy, it's true. I mean, because that's how there's what I call divine economics, Terry, and you're playing on the right side of the fence, my friend. Okay, so with that, I want to be your friend just because of that, right? So that's just like that's the kind of friends you want. Well, cool. So, Lise, we haven't heard a lot from you. What do you think about this Terry guy here we got in podcast today? What's your feedback on this guy? What do you want to know about him?
Well, I actually have a question. So you talk about forming the foundation of unshakable beliefs and dedicated behaviors. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, what are some examples of that?
I think that really what I'm talking about there is values. You see people every year, January 1st, I got New Year's resolutions. 80% of New Year's resolutions are done by the middle of February or something like that. People have goals. I'm going to write my goals. I'm going to have my goals. Why don't I attain my goals? And I think the reason we don't obtain our goals is because we don't know what our values are. They're not tied to anything that is unshakable in us, that is not going to be moved based on the way the winds are blowing or what people are saying or things like that. And Lisa, I just feel like we seem to think that we're born empty, and that when we get out of school or we get into life, whatever that looks like for you, that then your job is supposed to be to fill yourself up. So I've got to get a good education, and I've got to get a good job, and I got to make a lot of money, and I got to live in a nice house, drive a nice car, have the latest cell phone, all that kind of stuff. And by filling ourselves up, somehow we think we're going to be fulfilled, we're going to be happy. And what I found is it's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full. We're born with everything we need to be successful in life already inside us. We just need to find it and pull it out and use it to our benefit. So it shouldn't be about what I can get. Our lives should be about what I can give, and should be about emptying ourselves out, certainly for our benefit, but also for the benefit of our families, of our friends, of our communities, of our country. And I think if you look at things like that, now all of a sudden you're a servant leader, and you're an individual, kind of like Chad said, I want to be friends with you. I want to hang around you, because people like that make you better. They make you a
Mm-hmm.
better person all the way
Right.
around, and that's kind of what I mean when I talk about that.
I love it. Great question, Lisa.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love it.
And you're really good with your words. It's simple enough but complex enough, and I love what you're doing with everything. So, you align with a lot of philosophies that I also teach, Terry, and I love kind of throwing things back and forth like we're doing right now. So I appreciate you throwing this stuff out there. Like when I think of service, so our principles here are steal your life back, fire your boss, live a life full of purpose. I actually sometimes switch the word purpose with service. I believe through service you find purpose, but if I said service to people, they want to run from it, right? So unless they understood what you're trying to say, Terry, is that like that is where the purpose comes from. You said it yourself through that student that you had at dinner, right? It's through the service that the purpose that's it. You've already done it. It's all part of the story, right? And then in service, you want to be, when you get hung up in the end of the day, Terry, I think of you as not a nice shiny pair of shoes in the corner of a closet that got wore 4 or 5 times. I see you as an old pair of boots that could never be worn another day again. Like you're going to be put away, used, Terry, because that's your duty to what you said, your country, your community, like anything that you can give to. And so for you, I think that's your character, right? Is when you go to be like, that was it. He put it all out there. And I think that's the best way to go out.
Yes.
No
I
matter
mean,
what.
We should all be, I want to die learning. I want to die understanding. I read a lot. I think that's an incredible way to learn things. Our daughter gave my wife and I a master class subscription last year. I mean, I took a master class from Misty Copeland, the ballerina from the American Ballet Company. I don't know anything about ballet. I got one leg. There's no way I'm doing ballet ever, But what can I learn from how she, probably one of the greatest ballerinas of all times, can do that? I took a class from Sarah Blakely, who started Spanx and is married to Jesse Itzler, who used to own the Atlanta Hawks. And I heard Itzler talking one time about her. She started Spanx with a prototype and $5,000. That was 20 years ago. And he talks about how if she would have waited until everything lined up perfectly, till she had, the marketing and the distribution and the manufacturing all lined up, he said, I guarantee you somebody else would have come up with that idea and would have implemented. He said, she just jumped in. She jumped in with both feet. Let's see what happens. I'll figure it out as I go along. But that's scary. And we don't like scary. We like to be, I know what's going on. I know what's going to happen. But you've got
back
to
to
get
that fear.
Say that again?
So back to that fear.
Yeah. But that's, our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort and to seek pleasure. So to the brain, the status quo, the way things are right now, hey, comfortable, familiar, just leave it alone. And my players will tell you, I used to constantly remind them, you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I always made my practices weird, difficult. I wanted the practices to be harder than the games were for them. So it's stepping outside your comfort zones. That's how you grow. That's how you get better. That's how you develop. But so many people.
Yeah, it's not a secret. It's not a secret, but everyone acts like it's a secret, right? It's like, let's tiptoe around it. Even though everyone really knows what you're saying, Terry, when you tell them, they're probably like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I know. If I did, yeah, okay, yeah. And you see it even probably on the court with your students, and when you're coaching, they're like, yeah, I know what you mean. But are they really putting it in front of themselves, right? And purposely and consciously, right? It's when you're like, look, I understand this is going to be a big challenge. And I see people do this all the time, especially these mountain climber guys. They're like, I just want to do it to do it. They're literally putting like a ridiculous challenge in front of themselves that has nothing but bragging rights around it, right? And they're doing it for that purpose, to put themselves out there, so they know, like, well, if I can do that for basically this meaningless reason, I could do anything in life. And I think that's what people are trying to prove to themselves, is like, if I'm going to do this thing for just bragging rights, watch out, I'm coming for you.
Right.
So I think that's really, really powerful. Your philosophies are amazing, man. I'm sure, I can't imagine there's not huge takeaways at all your speaking events, and along with your book. You did it, man. You're full on in service right now. You're getting the message out there, being on a podcast like this, where we're obviously trying to break the norms, but to steal your life back is also lines up with what you're doing. You know, minimizing all the BS, right? That's what that means. Putting yourself in a zone where the world isn't manipulating you. You talked about at the beginning of the podcast, the authentic version of you, right? Like that part of you is being just stripped away on the daily, and it's coming for you every day too, right? Even this podcast, guys, like what Terry's saying to you and what he's saying to the world right now with his message is, you don't have to adopt everything everybody says, right? That you need to choose wisely what you adopt into your life. Not all advice is good advice, and not everyone is on the same path. But the idea when you're following people, or, you know, whatever people do, man crush and, you know, coaches and all this stuff, you have to make the decision. This is good for me, and this is what I call asset or liability. If it's an asset to my long-term goal or mission, boom, I'm in. If it doesn't align with that, you know, I don't know that it's a good fit for you. And that's the part you can control, right? Outside of that, you can't control the rest of it. So I'm loving Terry here. So sorry, I'm taking the floor on this whole thing.
I did have one more question for Terry, though. Terry, if you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Boy, that's a great question. I'm going to tell you another story. I'm just trying to decide which story I want to tell you. So,
we know it's coming, Terry. We take your time, bro. Take your time. We can edit the awkward silence.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Back being a negotiator again, you know, just say something and shut up. I'll tell you this story. So I had a nurse recently ask me what it was like to have my foot amputated in 2018 and my leg amputated in 2020. And I told her it hasn't been easy. I mean, I'm 6'8" tall. So learning how to walk again, falling is not an option. You get hurt from this height. So, you know, I'm real cautious on doing that. But what I told her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind. It can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Lise. That's who you are, Chad. And we tend to think that, you know, we how do I want to say this? We get to a point in our lives where
it's gonna be good.
I don't know if it's gonna be good or not, but it's gonna be something. That's for sure. I see. This is what happens when you're old. You get a senior
let's back it up, Terry. Let's back it up, dude, because this is a big deal. I think everyone should ask themselves what they would tell the 18-year-old version of themselves, right? And it can be a hard thing to say and like put out there, right? Because first of all, you're talking to the dumber version of you.
You are.
Yeah. You are. And you are doing your best at that age. But if you could peek your head around the corner and just go, you know, hey, Terry, real quick, before you go after this whole thing, you know, like, you don't know who I am, but you should know this one thing, right? What would that be for you, man?
And again, I would say, you know, my heart, my mind, my soul. We spend a tremendous amount of time working on this body. You know, we exercise, we get enough rest, we eat right, we reduce stress. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But what I am suggesting is maybe every day, spend a little more time working on who you really are, your heart, your mind, and your soul. We know this body's going to die.
Terry,
we know the body's going to die.
Heavy,
we know the body's going to go away. We know the body's going to decay. But I think our heart, our mind, our soul, those things are eternal. Those things are going to live on. And I don't think we spend nearly as much time working on those things as we should.
Man, can I recap on that? So for our listeners, Terry's saying that as a part of his body was taken from him through the circumstances of this planet we live on, he came to a moment where he realized he isn't that. And maybe he knew it before, but boy, does he know it now. And it was like this, okay, you're right. I am bigger than this. And now I'm certain of it. I'm not even, there's zero question that like, these are the things that matter and I believe that I am. And so in that moment, he's asking us all to just reflect and do the exercise and the practice on self, the authentic self, the mind, the soul. And I'm new to this kind of philosophy as well, Terry. And I've turned it into a few words here, and tell me if this resonates with you. Is that experience is the currency of the soul? That's the part you take with you, and you have to touch it and feel it and be it. Now, can you read it? Yeah, and experience it? Yes. But if you can do it and be it and embody it, that's the currency you're going to take with you eternally. Does
Yes.
that resonate with you, Terry?
It does. I mean, and that's from your heart. You know, we talked a minute ago, and it's like, you know, you should approach life with an open mind. I think you should approach life with an open heart. Is this something that my heart is saying I should do? Because if that's the case, then yeah, you should probably do it. If it's like you said, I don't know if I want to do that. It's not resonating with me. Then yeah, it's probably not a road you want to go down. Be open to your heart, but people they don't know how to do that. It's like,
Yeah.
what is this good for me or not? Not just good for me physically, or I'm going to make money or whatever.
Right.
Is it good for who I really am? My heart, my mind, my soul.
That's beautiful, dude. It's hard to talk to people about that kind of stuff, Terry, because when I open the dialogue like that, I open it up with, okay, so if you didn't have a car payment, and you didn't have bills to pay, and you didn't okay, because you already know the stuff that's out there, you know, that everyone's struggling with, and they're making decisions based on this. And Lisa and I do this all the time. We always ask ourselves, okay, so are we using the right things to make our decision today? Because, and this goes back to you, Terry, with, you know, the consequences and stuff. But you know, when we open this dialogue with people, we ask them, so if those things didn't exist, what would you be doing right now? And they always answer something else than what they're actually doing. And if you can get them to say that, you can kind of box them in a healthy way and say, well, do you see what I'm saying? You're making decisions based on contracts that you signed 5 years ago, relationships you started 10 years ago, animals you brought into your home 5 years ago that don't align with the bigger thing that's way bigger than you, serving at a way larger level. They're literally holding you prisoner, and you're not admitting that. And you're saying, no, I'm just stuck, and that's it. No, actually, these things are things you can control, and you're not just stuck, and you're sort of living a delusional life. How do I know that? Because you just actually told me, right? But it's so hard, Terry. How do you approach that, my man? Like, for our listeners, because people need to hear sometimes that, kind of break it down for them. How do you do that? Open that dialogue.
Yeah, I kind of go back in my life. So I always felt my purpose, my mission, my why, whatever you want to call it, was to be in law enforcement. And my grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954 and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury, he was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. And so when I expressed an interest in following in my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was, absolutely not. You're going to go to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted me to do.
Sure.
And so when I graduated from college, my father's dying of cancer. I have this huge decision to make. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. Now, understanding that backstory, my resume looks a little bit more palatable because my first 2 jobs were in business. But one of the things that I am most proud, and I don't mean to sound conceited, but one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is that I never let my purpose die. I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old to be getting into that line of work.
You were lucky, actually, yeah.
Yeah, and I never let it die. And it's kind of like what you were saying. So many people get into this sort of rut where, okay, I'm in my 30s, I've got a mortgage, but I'm not really happy. I'm not living my purpose. I was like, no, I know what my purpose is. I'm going to get there. I don't know when I'm going to get there, but I know I'm going to get there at some point in time. Never let that die. Never let that flame go out of what your purpose is in life. Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, was a concentration camp survivor during World War II, said, we have a moral obligation to find our purpose in life and to live it. And I'm just so glad I never let that fire go out.
We love our dreamers, Terry. We love them. We love what you've done with yourself and where you've taken yourself, and you shared many amazing stories. Yeah, I can't help but think about that journey everybody's on right now. And, you know, strip away the BS, guys. I'm not going to be philosophical. There's a lot of bullshit in your life right now. You know what it is. Quit lying to yourself. Get rid of the bullshit. Start introducing things that align with you. You know what they are. You don't have to ask your friends about it. You don't have to get permission from your mom. You already know. Don't read a book. Don't go on the internet. Don't search Google. What's my purpose? How do I find purpose? You already know. The problem, like Terry said, you're not exercising and practicing authentic versions of you. So I'm going to leave it at that, Terry. Do you mind? Because we've kind of come to our end here, and I told everyone at the beginning we had a lot to unpack. So I'm sorry we couldn't do it all with you today, Terry. But dude, your book, show us your cover again. Tell us, people. Yes, the note right here. What I love most about the book is it's got Terry's name on it. And he is super proud to get his message out there. And videos like this will help his message live on and his mission long after he leaves this planet. So, Terry, you've done it, brother. Keep doing it. And we wish you the best, man, in your journey. And we're 100% supporters of everything you're doing for the world right now. So can't wait to see
where can people get your book?
Anywhere you can get a book online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, anywhere you can get books online, you can get Sustainable Excellence.
And you can also mug him after his next event and take the book out of his hand. Sure he won't fight for it. Okay, take it. All right. So as we wrap up another episode of Fire Your Boss Fridays, remember the words we live by: steal your life back, fire your boss, and live a life full of purpose or service. As we talked about today, we believe it's not just a saying, it's sort of an embodiment. A quote that greets, the purpose of life is not to be happy, it is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. And this is Ralph Waldo Emerson. So until next time, keep the rebel spirit burning, people. Burn bright, burn authentic, and serve with all your heart. Thanks for joining us, Terry, and say farewell to our audience, and we'll wrap it up.
Well, audience, thank you very much. Chad, Lisa, I enjoyed this conversation. And I always say, hopefully this conversation will make a positive difference in somebody's life. If it does, today's been a good day.
Oh, you already got me, brother. I'm a fan.
Thank you.
All right. See you later.
Yes.
Take care.